Good morning, everybody. This is another edition of the Pass Ball Show. Today is the third day of May 2018. Hitting you with a little bit of a morning edition of the Pass Ball Show, brought to you, of course, by JohnPielli.com, as well as St. Aloysius Church and School in Jackson. A couple of different things we're going to talk about today. And, I'm going to start today by talking about the New York Mets, and I haven't spent a lot of time being, Mets-centric in regards to the show. We've talked a lot about Major League Baseball, and I do promise we're going to talk some other teams in a little bit. But obviously, the Mets got off to a very good start this year, 11-1. Since then, it seems like a lot of their flaws have come to the forefront. And earlier on, it was easier to see through the mistakes that were being made and the fact that they were just playing a brand of baseball that was imperfect, that wasn't set to sustain itself, being 10 games over 500 or winning 11 out of every 12 games. And I think most people with a good head on their shoulders and, maybe not being over dramatic, were going to understand that this was something that was not going to be able to be sustained. Well, number one, if Jacob deGrom is out for any considerable period of time, there's a good chance the Mets may fall from the top of the standings to the bottom of the standings. Because, when we talk about issues that they've had in regards to, not being able to hold things together. On days that Noah Syndergaard and Jacob deGrom are not starting, the chance and opportunity to win, the margin has dropped dramatically. But the one thing I did want to talk about today is, the Mets are about to finish off a series against the Atlanta Braves, and every game that's played, let's be real, we could talk about momentum as it, exists, or how much you believe in momentum, or you could say momentum is just as good as the next day's starting pitcher. However you want to view it, it's a 50-50 chance you're going to win every single game. And a lot of people may not believe that, a lot of people may not subscribe to that, but it's the absolute truth. When a game starts at 0-0, it's one starting pitcher against the next starting pitcher, one, group of players against another group of players, and no team in an individual game has a distinct advantage. Now, you can say that, if you run two teams against each other 100 times, that superior team may win, 95, 96, 97, maybe even 99 times out of 100. But the bottom line is, on a given day, anything can happen. So I look at the Mets as they finish off their series against the Atlanta Braves today at 1 o'clock, and I'm not going doom and gloom and expecting them to lose, but I think, like a lot of other fans, I wouldn't be shocked if they lost. And the reason is not so much that the Mets are on a losing streak, not so much that, Jacob deGrom could very well be out for a considerable period of time. Maybe not so much because the 11-1 start, was kind of a little bit of a hiding of the team's flaws, but because I believe that the Atlanta Braves are a superior team to them. The Atlanta Braves, 2 years ago, going into the 2017 season, looked like a team that was about to take that next step, a team that I predicted last year was going to go 82-80. A lot of things didn't work out, and Brian Snitker, the manager, who was an interim manager the year before, ended up getting the full-time job the next season, almost lost his job over it. And the Braves obviously went through some dramatic changes that had nothing to do with anything that was going on the field. John Hart and John Coppolella, two guys that built this organization pretty much from scratch. Remember about 2014, the Braves had all those players that they ended up making those trades, specific trades with the San Diego Padres, and they ended up moving a lot of players off of that team. Andrelton Simmons, Justin Upton, Craig Kimbrell were among all players that were shipped out of there. Pretty much everybody, for the exception of Freddie Freeman. And what the Braves have done is they obviously did a great job with scouting and development, brought some very good young players in. And, we're expected to see some of the fruits of that last season. For whatever reason, we didn't. Maybe something had to do with what was going on in the front office. John Coppolella getting banned for life. John Hart, who was overseeing the organization, may not have had as much, if any, guilt involved in the matters that were going on with the improper signing of international players, ends up resigning. So Alex Anthopoulos is in there, the former Blue Jays general manager. He makes that big trade with the Dodgers, trading Matt Kemp for Adrian Gonzalez, Scott Kazmir, Brandon McCarthy, and Charlie Culberson, and releases Adrian Gonzalez, eventually releases Scott Kazmir, and all of a sudden Jose Bautista is playing in AAA, getting ready to be their starting third baseman. I don't think a lot of the moves that were made this offseason by Anthopoulos are the reason why the Braves have put things together. It's pretty similar to a lot of other young teams. Sometimes you just need another year. And I think the Atlanta Braves right now, as we sit on May 3rd of 2018, are exactly where I thought they would be on May 3rd of 2017. A team that was over 500, a team that was overachieving, a team that was starting to put some fear in its opposition. And if you heard me earlier in the week and last week talking about the fear that exists in the National League East, you have the Washington Nationals, who are off to a bad start. The Mets, who up to a certain point were off to a very good start. The Braves and Phillies are playing well. I spoke about it yesterday, how the National League East is impacting the Washington Nationals, because it's not a matter of them just clicking on a switch and all of a sudden doing, playing baseball pretty similar to what we've expected in 3 of the past 4 seasons. I understand that there's an urgency set there in Washington, that they have to win this year because Bryce Harper may or may not be back next year. Gio Gonzalez, Daniel Murphy will all be free agents at the end of the season. So there's a very good expectation that the Washington Nationals will look a lot different than they do, right now than they do next season. So it would behoove them very much to not only win the National League East, but advance pretty far in the postseason, maybe make a run to the World Series. But the reason I would be concerned with the Washington Nationals is the same reason that I would be concerned with the New York Mets. I don't think the Atlanta Braves are going anywhere. I don't think they're going anywhere anytime soon. I think this is a team that is going to be in it the entire season. Now, I was trying to think yesterday as I'm watching the Mets, game kind of gets away from them. Of course, Jacob deGrom having to leave after 4 innings was a big deal. But, the Braves put some hits together against the Mets bullpen. And listen, it's a game. Jacob deGrom leaves after 4 innings in a tie game. You kind of expect your team to lose that game. And the Mets did. So I'm watching this Atlanta Brave team, and I'm trying to figure out what is it that the Atlanta Braves have that the New York Mets don't. And I think from a lineup perspective, I see about 3 or 4 players, one in particular with the Atlanta Braves, that seems to be impossible to get out. And we'll start with Freddie Freeman. The Mets do not have a Freddie Freeman on their entire roster, and probably have to go back to the days of Mike Piazza and Edgardo Alfonso to have a player or multiple players that other teams looked at and said, man, there is just no way to get this guy out. The Mets have a 1 through 8 lineup, and I use that term very loosely because their catching situation is absolutely atrocious. But they have a series of very streaky players, led by Yoenis Cespedes. Todd Frazier is another streaky player. Jay Bruce is a streaky player. Michael Conforto off to a god-awful start this year, and we're starting to see people take notice of it. But you're looking at all players that are very, very streaky. And when you have streaky players, it's hard to get all of them going at the same time. But most importantly, it doesn't strike fear in an opposition, because the opposition looks at your team and looks at your lineup and says, you know what? There's ways to get you out. If I don't make mistakes, for the exception of that 1 or 2 times a year where an individual player will be on absolute fire, I can navigate through this lineup. Sean Newcomb was thinking about that yesterday. Even a rookie, Soraka, in his Major League debut on Monday, was given ways, saying, listen, this is how you pitch this team. You'll be able to get these guys out. Don't pitch, down and in to the majority of the hitters, and you'll be able to get them out. Every now and then, a Cespedes will be in a groove where anything you pitch him, he's going to, get on base. He's going to hit the ball out of the park. He's going to be on absolute fire. Conforto's got that in him. I think Todd Frazier has that a little bit in him. Adrian Gonzalez years ago had that in him, though he's no longer the same player. Asdrubal Cabrera has been very consistent this year, but once again, he is another player that at some point is going to struggle, is not necessarily killing a ball right now. And over time, you're going to find that there's a certain way to get him out. So what the Braves have, not just with Freddie Freeman, but with Ozzie Albies, with Ronald Acuna, with Dansby Swanson, they have a series of hitters that no matter what your pitching looks like, no matter who you're throwing out there, whether it's Noah Syndergaard or Jacob deGrom, or anybody that's much less and much worse than that, the Braves have hitters that strike fear in you as the opposition. And the Mets don't have that. And I don't know how to change that. Part of it may have to do with Sandy Alderson's philosophy, the type of hitters that he's looking to get in there. Obviously, he's looking to get guys in there that have a little bit of patience, are going to get on base, but most importantly, hit the ball in the air, the launch angle, to hit the ball over the fence. And the Mets have a group of players like that. They're going to hit their share of home runs. In fact, up to this point, they probably haven't hit enough home runs based off of what the back of the player's baseball card says. The problem that I would have is that there are no Ender Inciartes on the Mets. There are no Ozzie Albies on the Mets. And there certainly is not a Freddie Freeman on the New York Mets. What makes Freddie Freeman one of the best players in all of Major League Baseball, and the unfortunate thing about it is it doesn't get spoken about enough. A lot of attention goes to a Joey Votto. Of course, we talk about the guys like Trout and Harper and Arenado and Goldschmidt and Altuve. Guys over time have developed and earned the respect of the rest of the people in Major League Baseball. Freddie Freeman is not yet. And I don't understand it. I mean, this is one of the better players in the game. And if I'm putting a list together of a 1 through 5 top offensive players in the game right now, maybe I push it to 5, but Freddie Freeman is definitely a top 5 player in all Major League Baseball because he's impossible to get out. Not only does he own the inside part of the plate, but he has the ability to drive the ball the other way. He doesn't ever seem to swing at a ball. And whenever the game is on the line, this is a guy that comes up big. And, not just the Mets, but I look at a lot of teams in baseball don't have a player like Freddie Freeman. And it's ironic a little bit because, you think of a veteran player like Freeman, a guy who was developed through the Atlanta Braves farm system, ends up coming up to the major leagues, starring with the team, a team that certainly looked a lot different when he came up to when the team that's struggled over the last couple of years. And Freddie Freeman stuck it out. And he has a chance right now to do probably what Joey Votto wants to do in Cincinnati. You want to be the best player on a good up-and-coming young team. And you got to go through some struggles for that. And Joey Votto's been going through probably these same struggles a little more than Freddie Freeman has. The Reds are in tough shape. The Reds have done a bad job. If I'm the Cincinnati Reds ownership, I'm getting a little tired of Dick Williams and Walt Jocketty. Because I want to ask them at some point and say, what exactly is your plan? Ever since you fired Dusty Baker after the 2013 season, you seem to be, just barely chugging along. It's been a second division team, a team that seems to, over the last couple of years, get worse and worse. And where they sit right now, they are damn atrocious. Joey Votto is a guy who signed a huge contract to be the face of that franchise over the next several years and has watched right in front of his own eyes players getting traded left and right, whether it's Homer Bailey, is pretty much the only veteran player that is sitting on that team that was around a couple years ago. Jay Bruce is gone. You look at, all the other talented players that they had there and he moved on from, but decided to keep Votto. Part of it may have to do with the fact that, Votto's contract is a little bit hard to move. But he still, over this time, has maintained himself as one of the best players in the game. So I look at it, and I think it's unfortunate because Joey Votto deserves the opportunity to play in the postseason. Part of it is, I think, to a certain extent, his loyalty to that team, but most of it has to do with his contract being so prohibitive for them to be able to trade. And I think if the Reds could have traded Joey Votto and his contract and gotten a good package back, they would have done it already. But I look at the Atlanta Braves, and Freddie Freeman having the opportunity to do something that not a lot of star players have a chance to do. And that's to be around for a rebuild and be there throughout the end of it, see the fruits of what an organization is doing, and be a leader of a series of young players. And Freddie Freeman is a perfect choice to do that. And I think that's part of the reason why the Braves are going to be here to stay. And I think they are a solid baseball team. Their pitching is going to come around at a certain point. It may not come around this year. But you look at a guy like Sean Newcomb. Julio Teheran is not really off to a very good start. Brandon McCarthy's a veteran, is supposed to be in there to pitch and provide a little bit of innings. But I tell you, their bullpen has been surprising. There's a series of relievers that I have heard very little of that are out there doing a very good job for them, and you hope that that continues. If it does, then I think the Braves could be even better than I'm saying. But I tell you, number one, if I'm the Washington Nationals, I got to be scared. I got to be scared that there's three other teams in the division that, are in it. They're competing. They're for real. It's not a joke. And you got to start to look at the writing on the wall when it comes to next year, whether it's Harper, whether it's Murphy, whether it's Gio Gonzalez, whether it's all three of them, ended up not being Washington Nationals next year. The team is going to look drastically different. And I think, I'll tell you, I like what the Phillies have done. I like to a certain extent what the Mets have done. But the team that has impressed me the most in that division is the Atlanta Braves. And I tell you, I absolutely think they're for real. Once again, this is John Pielli, Past Ball Show. Happy to be with you. Feel free to comment if you want on the Periscope feed or the Facebook Live feed. Anything on your mind in the world of baseball, sports, and unifying America. Coming into this season, there was a report that Ichiro, long-time Japanese outfielder who's had a great major league career with the Seattle Mariners, little time with the New York Yankees and the Miami Marlins, and most recently coming back to the Seattle Mariners, was planning on playing until he was 50. Now he's in his mid-40s now. I think he's like 44, 45, and it looks like he's ready to hang it up. Seattle Mariners putting out a press release the other day saying that Ichiro will be playing his last couple games for the Seattle Mariners in their homestand that they're currently in. So it's pretty much down to the wire. Ichiro is going to play his last game with the Seattle Mariners. Now, what I thought, and I thought about players years ago to kind of just manage to hang on, whether it was a Ricky Henderson, whether it was a Jamie Moyer, whether it was a Julio Franco, players of that echelon that, could probably say that they love the game of baseball. And there's nothing wrong with loving the game of baseball. I love the game of baseball. Many other people love the game of baseball. But, the issue is sometimes the game is trying to tell you when it's time to leave. And Ichiro has been a marginal player over the last couple seasons with the Miami Marlins. And the Miami Marlins, good thing for them. They were in a rebuilding phase. Had a very good outfield, obviously, the last couple of years with Giancarlo Stanton and Christian Yelich and Marcell Ozuna. So Ichiro being there as a fourth outfielder kind of, provided them a little something over the last 3 years. A veteran player that you could plug into the lineup. You could start for a couple weeks if you need to, if somebody's hurt. You could double switch him in a game. Obviously still has a little bit of speed. Not the player that he was 10 years ago, but a useful asset. Well, the Miami Marlins, and perhaps Derek Jeter had something to do with this, decided that they didn't want to bring Ichiro back. He had an option that was going to pay him, about a couple $1 million. Wasn't that big of a deal for any team, let alone a team that doesn't, isn't trying to have a big payroll. I mean, you have $2 million players as opposed to $10 million players. When you're looking at one of the worst teams payroll-wise in all Major League Baseball. But, Ichiro could have walked away from the Seattle Mariners, tried to find another job, whether it's in Major League Baseball, whether it's in Japan, and kind of lived up to his own expectation when he says he expects to play until he's 50. Well, going back to the point I just said, baseball, the sport, it's very humbling. And, you're watching players on the other side, players on your own team developing and getting better and being able to do things that you, as a very successful player yourself, cannot do anymore. And I think it's wise for a guy like Ichiro to realize that. I think it was wise a couple of years ago for a guy like Alex Rodriguez to realize what was happening before his own eyes. The younger players on the Yankees were getting better. The game was passing him by. He couldn't hit a 95-mile-an-hour fastball consistently. His eyesight or his perception of what he was seeing going on was not the same as what it was 10 years ago. And, part of it may have been the Yankees' insinuation that it was time for Alex Rodriguez to go. But part of it had to be Alex Rodriguez agreeing to it. So you look at the year plus that he had on his contract, and he could have walked away from it. If the Yankees gave him his release, he could have gone and played somewhere else, and the Yankees would have been, obligated to pay him the terms of his contract. Ichiro obviously not making anywhere near the same amount of money that Alex Rodriguez was, but he's got that pride factor. He goes out there, he has his daily regimens of how he gets himself ready to play, and he does it in a superior way than anybody else in the game does. But here's, a guy that's not putting up very good numbers for the Seattle Mariners, and the Mariners actually gave him a chance to play. An outfield that had some depth in it, and they gave him an opportunity to play. And I think part of it had to do with, trying to see what this guy's got left. And he's been very quiet this year. Never a guy known for much power, but he's got just 9 singles in 44 at-bats. He's hitting 205, which, a couple hits here and there, he could get the batting average up. But the fact is that he is just a punch and Judy hitter. A guy that is hoping to hit a ground ball between third base and shortstop and beating it out. And he's not providing very much for the Seattle Mariners at this point. So they do, they're doing themselves a service, the Mariners are, by saying, hey, there's value in each roster spot. And, we know that value in roster spots now in Major League Baseball are better than or bigger than they were ever in baseball history because of injuries, because of, stats and matchups and analytics and stuff like that. So Ichiro is sitting on a roster right now, hitting 205 with absolutely no power. Ben Gamel's back off the disabled list. D. Gordon's playing center field. You got Mitch Haniger, who's having a breakout season. Nelson Cruz is your designated hitter. Guillermo Heredia was off to a good start. You sent him down to the minor leagues to keep Ichiro up for a little bit. So now you hit a point where you finally can't afford to hide a guy. And I say this as it applies to pitchers a lot. You can't in Major League Baseball afford to hide a pitcher anymore. Whether it's a Matt Harvey of the Mets, and obviously as we hit the halfway point here on the Pass Ball Show, this is John Pielli with you. Obviously, be part of the program if you want to comment on the Periscope or Facebook Live feed. Moving on, talking about when I was talking about roster spots, the value of them. Matt Harvey may have a chance to go back into the Mets rotation, and if he does, good for him. But, that value of that roster spot or have that extra pitcher that is absolutely giving you nothing. And only use them when you're losing by a lot of runs or you're winning by a lot of runs just to get them in. Or extra innings. It's 6-6 going into the 15th inning. I don't think you could afford to do that in regards to pitchers anymore. But most importantly, you can't do that when it comes to players on the field anymore. And you can't afford to have a fifth bench player, even in the American League, a guy that you're not going to feel a ton of confidence in putting in there and letting them play every day, letting them get in the lineup a lot, expect them to come through in a big spot with the game on the line. If you don't have that confidence in a player, then those players are the ones that are going to have to go by the wayside and be replaced by other players that, all in all, will be able to do a little bit more or provide a little more for a team. Now, when it comes to players that have their careers ended, and I think if you think about the Seattle Mariners, it stands out because Ichiro, who's right about to walk away wearing a Seattle Mariner uniform, the uniform that obviously he'll be wearing, or the hat that he'll be wearing when he gets inducted into baseball's Hall of Fame, reminds you of another Seattle Mariners superstar, and that's Ken Griffey Jr. And Ken Griffey Jr. ends up finishing his career with the Seattle Mariners, and you know what? If you are not, a really good baseball fan, and I don't mean that as an insult, But I mean, a person that studies rosters and is down there remembering every single thing going back to 2010, you may have forgotten pretty easily that Ken Griffey Jr. finished his career with the Seattle Mariners. Obviously, a long career with Seattle, 50-plus home runs several times. A good year, a good series of years with the Cincinnati Reds, though he was injured a lot. Hits over 600 home runs. Obviously, is a first-ballot Hall of Famer. Great player. And ends up, in 2010, walking away as a member of the Seattle Mariners. And it was a pretty similar situation. You know, Griffey played a little more games that year, 33 games. He had 98 at-bats, was hitting 184 with no home runs, 2 doubles out of 18 hits. So it was obvious that he was struggling. And I don't know who made the decision that it just wasn't going to change. But June 2nd, 2010, Ken Griffey Jr. announces his retirement. And I don't know how much influence the Mariners had in his retirement, but I'm sure his roster spot at that very moment was in jeopardy. And sometimes, you know, a player ends up being led into a decision that the team believes is best for them. So the main point that I'm trying to get into here, Ichiro has the opportunity right now to test free agency, to perhaps get a job with another Major League Baseball team, go out on the field, put up some numbers, and continue his career. Ken Griffey Jr. probably had the same opportunity. I give these players respect because I know how much they love the game. And I think of a Ken Griffey Jr., I think of an Ichiro, and I think of an A-Rod, and I think of all those players that had probably made the decision that they were going to finish out the season, that they expected to play a lot longer than that given season. And they were cognizant and smart enough to see and realize that the game had passed them by and it maybe was best, not only for their team, but for themselves to move on into the next phase of their life. And it's never easy to do. And you could ask Ricky Henderson, you could ask Julio Franco, you could ask Jamie Moore, you could ask many of those players that just expected to be playing forever and all of a sudden had their talents and abilities just kind of taken from them. It's like their legs, you know, from a talent perspective, were cut off. And Ichiro, like I said, could test free agency. He saw how tough free agency was last offseason. So to get a job in Major League Baseball, to get signed not only by a team, but to a Major League contract by a team that expects to use you on their roster is very unlikely. And I think Ichiro is a very smart man. He knows, you know, what's going on. He understands that probably if he wants to play in Major League Baseball again, he's going to have to play a little bit in the minor leagues. And I think it's good to see it that way because, you know, if you don't, you're going to be sitting there waiting with your agent for a call that's never going to come. And if you tell your agent, say, listen, I only want to play Major League Baseball. Okay. I don't disagree with that premise. I expect a guy, especially somebody that's going to baseball's Hall of Fame, to look at themselves that way. But I also think you got to be cognizant. You got to be smart. You got to be somewhat noticeable of what's going on in the game. And I think Ichiro is. And I think because of that, that's led him to his decision. And you know what? If Ichiro is going to retire as a member of any organization, why not it be the Seattle Mariners? Why not it be a team that he is beloved in? Why not it be in a city that adores him? Why not? I think it's good for Ichiro. Once again, this is John Pielli, Past Ball Show. Brought to you by JohnPielli.com as well as St. Aloysius Church and School in Jackson, New Jersey. last thing I wanted to get into, and I'm not going to put too much details in this, but one of the things that frustrates me the most when it comes to real life is people kind of poking fun, but most importantly, kind of making themselves seem like they're a little superior just because somebody else makes a mistake. And mistakes exist in a world of sports as well. So this isn't a topic that is completely not related to the world of sports. But when you have a series of people that you know and you grew up with that end up being mentioned in a newspaper, in a story where they're all probably likely to get arrested and they're going to be charged with some sort of crime, my initial reaction is to pray for them. Pray that, you know what, maybe the authorities were mistaken. Maybe what they did was blown out of proportion. Maybe they can be proven innocent in a court of law. But all things that, in a court of public opinion, we may tend to go by and ignore and totally disregard. And the people that bother me the most are the people that decide it's their forum to kind of laugh or poke fun at somebody else's mistake, as if they live an imperfect life. But the truth is they're the ones that are actually, as if they are a vulture, prying in the lives of other people. And we all make mistakes. And I've said this on the show 100 times. And in fact, if we're going to talk about the top 5 points I've ever made on this show, one of them is the fact that everybody does make mistakes. And when you make mistakes, you don't want anybody to treat you differently. You don't want anybody to pry in on your own life and judge you over mistakes that you look and intend to correct. So when you're on the other side and you see that somebody else has screwed up,